Thank you very much, Kathy. Well, we start here tonight. The Reserve Bank has released reports assessing the vulnerabilities that could exist in South Africa's banking and insurance sectors in the financing of terrorism around the world. The report comes as the U.S. warned recently that South Africa is being used by terror groups such as ISIS to transfer funds to support terror activities. Joining us for more on this story and these reports and their findings is Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, Fundi Tshazibana. Thank you very much, Fundi, for joining us this evening. Let's start with your actual findings when it comes to the banking sector in South Africa. This particular report assesses money laundering, the vulnerabilities that exist when it comes to terror financing, and the reasons behind this particular report being released by the Reserve Bank today.
Good evening. I think this report is very important for us. So since 2019, as the South African Reserve Bank and other agencies in South Africa, we have been engaging with the Financial Action Force, FATA, around the evaluation of South Africa's exposure and risks to money laundering activities and terrorism financing and proliferation financing, which refers to illegal financing of weapons. So what we had to do as the Reserve Bank is to assess the risks that our banks and insurers are exposed to, and we put out 2 reports yesterday outlining the risks as we see them, and these relate largely to non-contact with clients. They relate to lack of information that we are able to verify clients and the activities that they are utilizing the banking system fully on. And some of this relates to the use of digital means. It also relates to lapses of time before banks can verify that their clients are still indeed the clients that they are interacting with. And it also relates to cash activities that are taking place in ATMs that are often difficult to verify. So those would be the broad highlights of some of the risks that we flag in these reports.
Ms. Tshazibana, let's talk about how serious, obviously, the SARB has taken some of these risks that exist, because as early as March this year, the U.S. warned that Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, better known as ISIS members in South Africa, were increasingly helping to transfer funds to the militant groups' branches across the African continent. This is absolutely serious when it comes to the warnings, particularly for the stability of the financial system in South Africa.
Yes, so in South Africa we have the Financial Intelligence Act, and the Financial Intelligence Center is the regulator. What we do as the South African Reserve Bank and the Prudential Authority is, based on what is in the law, we then issue guidance for banks and for insurers on how they should be monitoring these risks. The entities themselves have then got the obligation to report any suspicious activities that they see to the Financial Intelligence Center. We do undertake inspections of the entities that we supervise, and through those inspections we are able to pick up gaps that exist and how the entities should be monitoring the risk exposures or any undetected activities on their side. But the entities themselves have got an obligation to regularly report any suspicious transaction to the Financial Intelligence Center.
Of course, there should be some serious implications for South Africa globally if the country is largely seen or perceived or found to be lax in doing everything possible to prevent banks in this country being used to finance terrorism and launder money. The implications for the banks here at home, what would that be when you look from outside, investors from outside the country looking at what the implications are here at home?
The implications, Kolane, would extend beyond the banks themselves, but would also, there would be implications for you and I. When we are transferring funds abroad, for example, some of the banks are not able to do that directly. So a bank in South Africa would have to have a relationship with a correspondent bank in that country that you are transferring funds to. So a lot of the correspondent banks would start to rate our banks as high-risk banks, and that would be a risk that we are faced with. Secondly, there would be a risk for corporates as well. So you are a corporate that is in South Africa, and it's a country that is seen to be a high-risk country in terms of terrorism financing. There would be a lot of scrutiny in terms of due diligence when our corporates are undertaking deals in foreign countries. For the banks themselves, there is also a potential cost when they have to raise funds. It's just all of us will be under extensive scrutiny if it were the case that we would be placed under a grey listing, and there were concerns about our financial entities in particular.
Talk to us a little bit about the other report on the risk assessment by the Central Bank's Prudential Authority on the money laundering and terror financing in the life insurance sector. What are we talking about here, and how can the insurance sector be used in these criminal elements?
So in the insurance sector, so if you think about what we do when we are placing funds with insurers, there is scope for criminal activity, but not as much as there is in the banking sector. So if, for example, an unknown individual or entity were to have or utilize the life sector and have a policy paid up, and that potential payout has got a way for that individual to siphon off cash so that it is hidden, that is something that one would have to monitor. But the risk assessments, just bear in mind, are things that we have to do on an ongoing basis. So this is not the first risk assessment that we have done as the Prudential Authority. We have to do them periodically because criminal activities often change, and the risks that the entities are faced with also change over time. So what we do with these risk assessments is to ensure that we keep up with the changes that are there, that the emerging trends that we're seeing in financial crimes. And the idea is that we provide guidance that would place both banks and the life insurance sector in a better position to be able to manage the risks around these criminal activities.
Fundi, thank you very much for your time this evening. Fundi Tshazibana is the Deputy Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, talking to us about those reports that they've released assessing South Africa's vulnerability when it comes to money laundering and terror financing on terror groups around the world, including ISIS.